If I said the words dungeon crawling role-playing game, the first thing that would probably come to mind is something along the lines of Diablo, or Titan Quest, or Path of Exile. These are definitely some crucial, typified examples of the modern Western incarnations of this genre. Despite being the major convention now, this isometric top-down viewpoint was actually pretty uncommon for early incarnations of the dungeon crawler genre, which predominantly took place mostly in first person. Games like Ultima Underworld and Eye of the Beholder would have you navigate dimly lit corridors from the point of view of your party, moving grid by grid until they would encounter monsters, treasure, or traps. Usually when I give historic context at the beginning of a review, it comes from a place of experience or nostalgia, but this time, things are a little bit different. I have pretty much zero experience with games of this kind, and this is gonna be a first for me. It's not that they've never interested me, I just wasn't aware of them in their prime, and when I started getting into RPGs, the mechanics and interfaces had evolved tenfold, and I was one of those kids who got their start playing Oblivion. But when I was offered a copy of SteamPunk Dungeon Crawler Vaporum, something about the blend of Bioshock-style visuals and old-school PC dungeon crawling piqued my interest, as well as curiosity for how a game of such ingrained PC roots would function on the Nintendo Switch. Well, to begin with, the game's visuals are pretty decent across the board. Character designs are extremely appealing, following that sentient diving helmet mechanical look that was popularized so heavily by Bioshock icon Big Daddy, that builds on historic interpretations by many artists of the fantastical worlds and futures pioneered by classic authors like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, that has since flowered into a diverse realm of fantasy and science fiction work and plenty modern icons of its own. Even Disneyland Paris has an entire section of the park dedicated to this kind of thing. It's awesome. You'll see plenty of bronzed up bad guys with plenty of gears, glass plates, and spindly hinges, and it's important these guys be well designed because you're gonna end up seeing a lot of them. There are variants to keep them interesting, but a majority of the game divides its troops into the same enemy archetypes. A neat little addition is the ability to view any defeated enemy and their various animations from the title screen, which is a feature I'd love to see anywhere in any game. It provides fantastic reference for artists, cosplayers, and other creatives alike, as well as allowing audiences to truly appreciate the digital craftsmanship that goes into each model. Where the game's visuals don't hold up as well, unfortunately, are the environments. Now don't get me wrong, the individual segments and environment pieces are extremely well designed and produced, and each floor of the facility you explore has a distinct visual language that differentiates it at a glance. There's also a healthy dose of post-processing that creates a dense atmosphere, and really makes the lighting pop. If anything, the artistry feels held back by design choice, as one of the major mainstays of this genre is a grid-based map that relies on reuse of segments and entities to fill a large, sprawling, labyrinthine floor. Navigation is also hampered by this, as the corridors and rooms start to blur together and you find yourself checking your map uncomfortably often. A bigger variety of visual landmarks, maybe some statues or buttresses or gantries or paintings or something, would really break the monotony here. I understand that this is typical for a game of this type to do, but I think rising beyond the typical in this case would have made the game a hell of a lot more memorable. Perhaps ditch the segment approach entirely, and opt for organic and characterized spaces built on strong concepts, that account for the grid-based structure without needing to incorporate it visually. There's a hell of a lot of reference material out there, and it would make this game really stand out and be that much more impactful. This may be a dungeon crawler, but this doesn't mean you have to stick with old-style dungeons architecture, you know? Gameplay is actually more varied than I expected going in. Whilst there is a heavy emphasis on combat, which is well-rounded and has a pretty developed set of mechanics that never strays from a small amount of simple commands, there's just as much puzzle-solving and exploration to be found here too. Where the combat is pretty dang solid all around, I can't say the same for a lot of the puzzles. About half of them are real brainbusters and really do give you a sense of eureka when you finish them, but the other half of the time they're the kind of cursor-hunting, trial-and-error slogs that make you say, ugh, finally, I can move on. Take this one for example. I enter a room with 6 pressure plates. After being confused, looking around for boxes or anything else to pin them down, I step on one and see one of the lights light up. I move to another one and it turns off. It turns out I was supposed to hit the correct order without pressing any wrong, with no indication as to what the correct combination is without resorting to the process of elimination. My relief for completing this arduous slog is also cut short, as the room fills with spider enemies. In fact, the recurring theme in this game for marking progress or rewarding the player seems to be throw enemies at you willy-nilly, which can really throw you and catch you unprepared if you've been spending the past 20 minutes or so outside of combat with the floor almost cleared, searching for the one button or lever you need to move on. Thankfully, you can always keep a line of defense against surprises like this by freezing time, a mechanic with unlimited use that lets you plan your moves in advance, and only unfreezes for the duration in which an action is executed. This is an absolute lifesaver in some of the more claustrophobic encounters, and actually makes a pretty innovative asset in some of the better puzzles. You can also quick save whenever, and I really mean whenever, and load in relatively quickly, which alleviates a lot of the stress from accidentally straying into pitfalls here and there. However, these surprise encounters can be more of a hassle than the usual encounters, as a big part of this game's combat loop comes down to maneuverability. Making sure you have the space to back up from an area of effect attack, or the strafing area to break line of sight with a terrifying laser drone, all of this can go out the window when you run out of grid to move on. And if you're not aware of something sneaking up against you, this goes to hell very, very fast. This means keeping up to date with the best gear available on any level is absolutely essential for survival, but a lot of it is hidden behind secrets. Additionally, the user interface and text are way too small for handheld mode. If I'm damaging an enemy too far away, I literally can't make out how much I'm actually doing. By default, the gamma on portable is also extremely low, so you're gonna have to turn that up if you value seeing more than a few feet in front of you. The binding of menus and in-game actions actually translates to controller pretty well, although having your two weapon sets bound to the right thumbstick means I found myself more often than I'd like to admit pulling out my shotgun and shooting in the wrong direction. Additionally, having to meander through your entire inventory to change abilities, rather than having them be available in the other set on the fly, means I pretty much don't experiment with anything other than neutral all-rounder skills like accuracy and melee buffs. I'm sure these plasmid-style elemental attacks are really cool, but honestly I just cannot bring myself to go through my inventory and switch to them for each situation. I'm sorry, but I just don't want to do that. On top of pure gameplay, Vaporum has a story too. There's as much here as you want to look for, and the game doesn't throw any of its narrative in your face. If you're like me, you'll probably opt to disregard the journals and audio logs you'd find until doing a catch-up session later down the line, and I appreciate the option to do this without feeling like I'm missing critical information to my current situation. Voice acting from the protagonist can also go either way.
I need a key. This is a bit too quiet.
Personally, I find the cheese charming, but it might rub you the wrong way if you're trying to more seriously take in the atmosphere. Overall though, there's a lot to love about Vaporum for fans of dungeon crawlers from any generation, and its highs do outweigh its lows. If you can forgive some of the frustrations and aren't too proud to resort to a walkthrough when you need it, you'll probably have a good time with this one. If you're looking for a game of this kind, especially on the Switch, it does a lot better than the recent competition, the only game I'm aware of anything like this being Heroes of the Monkey's Tavern, and well, let's just say, it's not good. That's being kind. Anyways, if you've played Vaporum, or you do so as a result of watching this video, please let me know what you think of it in the comments. Until then, I'm gonna go and polish my brass. I didn't think of how that sounded when I wrote the script.